Hello, everybody. Yep, here we are. Lots of stuff on the task side today. Where is it? There it is. Right. Yeah. So, yeah. Loads of stuff on the week today. Just a quick reminder to everybody of what we should be doing. Reading Hamlet, obviously, is the easy one to kind of remind you of. So, sorry it's quite dark today. It's a rainy, drizzly day, so the camera's struggling a wee bit with the light levels. We need to be reading, annotating, and researching basically a lot of stuff in Hamlet Act 4, scenes 5 to 7. They're quite heavy-going scenes. In general, it's quite heavy content in this session today. We're going to be doing all kinds of stuff around madness and death and all that kind of thing. Then to take some of that content and create either a poster or a PowerPoint presentation, depending on what you prefer, that explores Ophelia's presentation in the play and in popular culture. I think it's important that you bear in mind that Ophelia as a character exists as much in art and other literature as she does in Hamlet as a play as well, and that will just lead you to some interesting alternate interpretations of her as a character, which is cool. The third thing then, just as a reminder, is that you need to be writing 2 paragraphs comparing the representation of women over here in Hamlet and the Duchess of Malfi. So please make sure that you're doing that as well, because that will be really helpful for you to get revising for the Duchess of Malfi, because assuming that we are back at some point, and even if we're not, we'll have to be doing an assessment of some kind on the Duchess. So that's really good that we have that ready to go. Okay. Other than that, I hope that's all pretty straightforward, and that we're all happy with those things going on there. If anyone has any questions about any of these tasks, obviously send them over to me. More than happy to go through any of that as it is. I will obviously leave these up, and I'll bring these up a couple more times over the course of the session in case you forget about them. Secondly, I took the feedback that you gave me from the forms. Thank you for everyone who filled in that form. That was excellent. The 2 main areas of feedback were that you were keen for more structure in the setting of tasks, so the tasks to be used via the assignments tab. That's been done now, as you hopefully all know. Most of you have seen that and viewed it. So the assignments tab is now containing all of the work for the week and can be submitted there at the end of the week, so please use that. So that's great. So we did that pretty quickly. The other feedback was that you wanted a wee bit more one-to-one support throughout the week. So I'm going to put that in place for sure, as I said in chat. As well as that, I'm investigating what I could do for something maybe later in the week as a stream, maybe some more writing related stuff. I think some writing support would be quite good for later in the week. So if any of those suggestions are helpful, that'd be great. And those are the main 3 areas, I think, as I said, that I had feedback from the forum. But if you have anything else that you think is particularly useful, I would just drop that over to me in an email or on the chat today. That can be really helpful for us. So 3 scenes today. The first and the third of these 3 scenes are quite long and quite involved. The middle scene is weird and is sometimes not used. In fact, when you watch some versions of the play, you won't see that scene. And you will also see various bits of other scenes as well. Sometimes some content is shoved into here. You'll notice, I think it was the Andrew Scott production at the wasn't his production, but the production starring Andrew Scott at the Almeida certainly had that as a kind of change to this script that we're seeing today. You don't need to worry about that too much, other than that it's a kind of critically contested scene in terms of its usage, and more so than something like 4/4. So let's get cracking with Act 4, scenes 5 to 7. Let's have a look at them. Let's get straight to it. Here we are. I've got all my themes up for today already, which is excellent. So here they all are. Obviously AO5, not specifically a theme for this thing, but I want her distrust again is a kind of particularly useful theme. Blood, imagery of blood comes back up quite frequently and quite surprisingly common in this scene. So that's something there to be aware of. Scheming, as always, and madness. This is the dominant, I suppose, theme of this scene. So that's that there. Alongside blood, guys, you can mix in something like, I would say probably mixing in something like revenge as well, because I think that's probably the most notable theme, I suppose, for Laertes in the scene. If madness is the most notable theme for there you go, revenge is the most notable theme for Ophelia, then revenge is certainly the most notable theme for Laertes. Right, let's start then. So the Queen here, we start the scene in medias res. It's in the middle of action. The Queen seems to already be in conversation with this gentleman. Her outline, "I will not speak with her," suggests a kind of that she has been requested by the gentleman to talk previously to this conversation happening. Now, it's ambiguous, seemingly. Sorry for the shadow one here. I've had to put a light over to make sure that the camera can work properly today. So, obviously, it's an ambiguous line. I will not speak with her. When I say it's ambiguous, it's not ambiguous because there are two female characters in the play, and this is one of them talking. So, it shouldn't be a huge surprise as to who she's referring to. So the gentleman is basically like, look, she basically is acting perhaps beyond her. She is just relentless. She wants to talk to you. She is persistent. She is knocking down the door. And she is distracted. Now, this idea of distracted is going to link into that theme of madness that we're going to come across. No, not blood, not scheming, madness. We're going to come on madness that we're going to come on as we get this idea of being distracted. And the Queen is obviously just, what would she have? Why does she want to talk to me? What is her kind of motivation here? And the gentleman here realistically brings us back to the key factor probably in Ophelia's downfall is that she speaks much of her father. So Polonius's death seems to have had a huge impact on her, as you'd expect. And she says that she hears the tricks in the world and hems and beats her heart, spurns enviously at straws, speaks things in doubt that carry but half sense. Her speech is nothing, yet the unshaped use of it doth move the hearers to collection. So she is mad. She is talking. She is kind of suspicious of the world around her. She is clutching at straws. Spurns envy at straws. Sorry. She's speaking things in doubt. She doesn't seem wholly herself. Very similar, I suppose, to how Hamlet talks earlier, dubitably asking questions of things, raising ideas about stuff. As always, guys, if you have any questions on any of this, let me know as we go on. People then are taking the words that she's saying, as it says here, and botch the words up fit their own thoughts, which, as her winks and nods and gestures yield them, indeed would make one think that there might be thought, though nothing sure, yet much unhappily. So, like Polonius does earlier to Hamlet's melancholy, the idea is that Ophelia's thoughts and sayings and phrases and stuff are being interpreted as, whatever the listeners want them to be, that she is being taken and kind of multiply interpretable by other people, which I think makes sense for the scene. I think that makes a lot of sense for the scene in terms of the way in which we project a lot onto Ophelia, more than perhaps she is allowed to actually talk about things herself, thinking about the way in which the drama works. So as we turn over the page, Horatio gets his first line, and he, like always, gives some sensible advice. 'Twere good she were spoken with, for she may strew dangerous conjectures in ill-breeding minds. Let her come in. Now, Horatio's presence here is quite confusing. It's the only time I think really he's on stage without Hamlet in this couple of scenes here. And the fact that he's with Gertrude here with the Queen suggests perhaps, I don't know, a different relationship between Horatio and other characters than we've seen before in the play. He seems almost to be acting as a political advisor here, and it's interesting that perhaps this role wasn't given to a kind of lesser figure than what we've seen already, one of our kind of other political figures, maybe an Osric or something like that. So it's just interesting that we see this here. The gentleman is sent out to let her come in, and this is Horatio's request. The Queen has an aside. Again, think about the nature of aside, a nice bit of kind of internal kind of monologue as such. So to my sick soul, she kind of starts, as sin's true nature is, each toy seems prologue to some great amiss. So full of artless jealousy is guilt. It spills itself in fearing to be spilt. Now, this is a really interesting line, like loads of Gertrude's lines, super ambiguous in terms of what the guilt source is here. Realistically, the main guilt source is that Polonius has been killed and that she has with Claudius, been involved in covering up this murder. Yeah, she has hushed and quietly buried it as instructed in Act 4, Scene 1, when the king decides to sort it out, that he has been given kind of quiet funeral rites to keep the whole thing kind of covered up so that Hamlet's kind of misdeeds don't go too publicly and create too much, uproar in the state. So altogether, that is a bit of scheming. Yep, there it is. So it's altogether a bit of scheming from her and the king, but the guilt perhaps bleeds over into kind of readings of the character as somebody who was involved in the murder of her husband, and that's a kind of ambiguity there that you can play on if you are an actor. So that happens there. Now Ophelia comes in. She asks, "Where is the beauteous majesty of Denmark?" So she comes in with this seemingly kind of like deferential line, and what you'll focus is the two female characters here quite often are referred to by their physical qualities. So if you want to look at some kind of feminist critique of this text, that's a start. The beauteous majesty of Denmark, and Ophelia will be referred to as pretty girl, sweet girl, quite a few times here. And we immediately have Ophelia's kind of notable feature for her madness in this scene, which is her singing. This is probably something that we can look at as a really obvious example, formally, in terms of form and style and structure, of displaying madness here. She deviates from the other characters. No other characters, I don't think any other characters in this play sing. Maybe the players, if you've got a different production of it and they've made some changes to the text, but no one else sings. I mean, obviously the whole play is in verse, so it helps. It's easy to do songs because you're writing in verse anyway, but this would be songs obviously not set to music, but you have the tunes if you want to look at them, if you want to learn them yourself. The musical notation for the tunes for these songs, the melodies that they would follow, is located in the back contexts of your book, so if you want to look that up, that's absolutely fine, that's all there for you. But she starts singing, and I'll establish at this point two things. Her songs are seemingly about two topics. One of the topics is her father's death, so she sings a lot of songs about Polonius's death, and the other songs that she sings are seemingly about some kind of how to put it, some kind of jilted love that she's had. She seems to have had some kind of relationship with a man that is being unfulfilled, that she's been abandoned, and that therefore seems to be the cause of some kind of distress to her. Now we assume, obviously based on the implications here and given the only characters involved, that lover would be Hamlet. Obviously there's never any overt reference to the fact that this 100% happened, but we'll go through some of the songs. So we'll alternate through songs which we go from lover to father, and back and forth again. I've taken away the Freudian pop up today, but you can kind of work that out for yourself. Ophelia, then, her opening song opens on this idea. She gives us this song here, "How Should I Your True Love Know," from another one by his cockle hat and staff and his sandal shoes. So she opens with this kind of pilgrim figure in the song, and that pilgrim figure perhaps a reference to a lover. So she starts with this kind of image of the lover in the song, and the queen starts with this sweet lady, and it starts with this kind of infantilizing, kind of feminizing of Ophelia straight away. The sweet lady what imparts this song, and Ophelia completely starts rejecting social structures and hierarchies. Ophelia says, like, what? Say ye no, pray you Mark, listen to me. So she actually wrests control of the situation away from Gertrude for the rest of the scene. So let's move on a second and see how that goes on. And she continues her song here. He is dead and gone, lady. He is dead and gone. At his head a grass green turf, at his heels a stone. So we have this subject seems to be about her father, because he is the dead character here, Hamlet not dead. So yep, that seems to be a kind of topic of discussion for the next song. And the Queen tries to get a word in here, but Ophelia refuses to allow her and continues her song, continuing on about her dead father. So this is quite an interesting turn. Ophelia is really dominating the conversation here. It's the first time she's actually been able to kind of overrule character. You know, she didn't talk back to her father. Now she's talking to the Queen of the country. And she is talking back to her, shutting her down, telling her to listen to her. The king then enters, and the Queen almost talks about Ophelia as if she's just something on stage to be watched, to be observed. And I think this idea of Ophelia becoming almost an object is particularly key in this scene, a vision or something. Because the Queen shows the king her state as if it's something to be kind of, remarked upon. And Ophelia continues her singing and continues talking about the flower that should be on the funeral ground for her father. So the song continues and finishes off there. The king asks again, "How do you pretty ladies?" They talk in this kind of polite diminutive form again, very much the kind of typical expectations of femininity towards Ophelia. And Ophelia starts speaking now. She has her proper lines of speech, and you'll find that she is speaking now in prose. So she speaks in prose, and she is singing as well. So neither of her two forms of communication in this scene are typical of characters in the play. Characters speak in verse predominantly, and in this case, prose often a sign of madness. The song's obviously again a kind of interruption of madness. She gives us this kind of almost folk tale about the owl, and as a baker's daughter. It's quite a complex thing. I'll let you have a look in the footnotes for it, but realistically, it is essentially a narrative around the loss of virginity and allusions to that for her. The full narrative there, looking into that really for her relationship with Hamlet, I would say. The king, however, interprets this whole thing as a conceit, i.e. An idea, a concept around her father. So he believes that this is all around her father's death and nothing to do with Hamlet. Ophelia interrupts again. You can see by the dashes here that Ophelia is interrupting, and she does it again here. So pray, let's have no words of this, but when they ask you what it means, say you this. And she continues onwards to sing a little song. So you get the idea here. So this goes back to a song around the love theme. So St. Valentine's Day, all in the morning betime. She refers to herself as a maid at the window to be the Valentine of whichever young man is to be outside. Then up he rose and donned his clothes. This seems to be a kind of transition forward to the next morning. And ducked the chamber door. So ducked meaning here to open, to get ready to leave through. So we have this idea of this Valentine's, this lover narrative, where she, read maid here as virgin, realistically, with this kind of lover figure outside, this Valentine figure. And then, once the door has been ducked, so she goes down, opens the door, lets in the lover, lets in the maid, the outer maid, never departed more. So we have this narrative where she enters this relationship, this loving scenario. A maid does not depart a maid, which suggests that during this process in the song, with the Valentine figure, her kind of having almost romance to us seemingly here, that she is now no longer virgin, which perhaps a further allusion to her relationship with Hamlet. The king tries again to interject. Pretty Ophelia again repeats that, and she just continues. And she just says, indeed, without an oath, I'll make an end on it. So she continues this theme, and she gives this kind of short things by Jesus, an abbreviation there of Jesus, and by Saint Charity, alack and fie for shame. Young men will do it if they come to it by cock, they are to blame. Now, an obvious double entendre there with cock. It's not even very subtle. Obviously, the cock crows at the start of the morning. So that would be the kind of the end of the relationship there. But also, it is a penis, and that is again related to this whole sex narrative. Quoth she, before you tumbled me, you promised me to wed. So she gives this quote of this kind of innocent girl who, as in tumbled here, as a euphemism, perhaps linking back to leaped from the Duchess of Malfi, tumbled here, a euphemism for sex. And you tumbled me, you promised me to wed. So she kind of gives this narrative of a girl who had been promised marriage in exchange for sex, and this man, this supposed lover, gives an answer that I would have done that, I would have married you if you hadn't come to my bed and had sex with me. So there's this double standard, that same double standard, in fact, that we've seen previously in the play of women's representation by men, that Ophelia has been told about by her brother and her father at the start of the play. So whether this is just her jumbling up her content from the start of the play, from her instructions from her father, or whether in fact it is actually essentially a kind of admission or an almost truthfulness that she's able to speak now that she's mad. Now there's loads of AO5 that you can look at for this, and I would specifically point you into your critical anthologies, to the 4th essay of the main section. I referenced it a little bit last time, but that section is the essay, I think it's essay 4 of the first section of your essay. Yeah, there it is. And I'll just remind you of that now. That is Tragedy Essay 4, and that is Tragedy and Madness. So you can have a look at that there for this idea of some kind of how to put it? This idea that there's some kind of truth-telling function to madness in the play. Okay, so that's cool. We'll crack on. The King's again starts talking about her as if she isn't in the room to the Queen. You know, how long hath she been thus? Basically, how long has she been like this? Can I have a time frame on this? And Ophelia doesn't interrupt him, but kind of continues on. And she often in productions will adopt the same mannerisms and stylistics of the King here. And she's like, I hope all will be well. And she'll do her kind of like King impression. We must be patient, but we cannot choose to weep, to think that they would lay him in the cold ground. My brother shall know of it. And so I thank you for your good counsel. Come, my coach. Good night, ladies. Good night. Sweet ladies, good night. Good night. So not only is this the second time within a couple of scenes that the King has been called a woman, this is Ophelia's kind of just nonsense, and there's no kind of logic that follows her things. The King asks Horatio to follow her close, give her good watch, make sure she's kept safe, and then he goes into the mat. Now he can immediately identify, and this is a really interesting thing we're going to get into in a second, is this idea of the association between femininity and madness is just so heavy in the play. Hamlet's madness, characters are immediately like, well, he might be mad, but he might not be. He probably isn't. The King is like, I'm very suspicious of his madness. I'm going to investigate and detect and have like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. I'm going to have Polonius. I'm going to have all these people go and watch Hamlet to see what he's doing. To make sure that he's legitimately insane. Ophelia does a couple of things that are really different textually. The singing's different, obviously, but the rest of it isn't. Not much of it is different textually. And as soon as they start doing that, she's definitely mad. Off she goes into madness. Now, this is something that I'm going to kind of talk about now. It's a quick reference to madness and femininity. So, if we have a look at if you have your Word document there, and you can look at this later on. But this idea of madness and femininity is particularly key to the time period. I've included a couple of articles from the British Library, which are both very good, and some stuff here from the article as well. So at the time period, feminine madness like this was often associated with issues around love. Unlike, I suppose, Hamlet's madness, which is supposedly deriving from his kind of excessive brooding upon his topic. You know, he's a very clever man. He's thought too much, and it's made him the coward and the motor figure that he is, and that's inspired his emotional increase. For Ophelia, the implication is that she's gone love crazy, and that is the term is erotomania or love madness, would be the terms that we use here. There's an implication, and this idea, as it says, is explored by Edward Jordan's treatise on hysteria, which is the key thing here. Here is a brief discourse on a disease called the suffocation of the mother, I believe it is. Yeah, the suffocation of the mother. So this is the idea, and this sticks around for a long time. In fact, hysteria had been already. I mean, it's a classical derived term. It's been around since the classical world, but it's a long-standing belief culturally that women were prone to various forms of madness, or are prone to various forms of madness, I suppose is the theory, and this derives from predominantly the womb. Womb madness hysteria pretty much directly translates as, and that this makes women more irrational, sensitive to emotional outbursts, and likely to suffer madness in these formats, alongside things like love. So on the stage it says she's often costumed in virginal white to contrast with Hamlet's scholarly black, and in her mad scenes she enters with dishevelled hair, singing bawdy songs and giving away her flowers, symbolically, as it says here, deflowering herself, which is about as obvious a metaphor as it gets, but it's pretty accurate, and she'll come back and do that in a second. We'll talk about how drowning is a symbolically feminine death as well. We've talked previously in the lessons about how water and kind of liquid-like substances are often associated with femininity. Poison that the king uses, femininity again. Okay, so lots of stuff in there to have a look at. I've given you those articles there. I don't need to go into that in much more detail, but you can see them as well if you want to look them up now. Ophelia, Gender and Madness, and the first book on hysteria are up there online. And this was used for a long time to deny women autonomy. Especially things. So this is the kind of stuff that's later adapted into the 19th century and used as justifications to stop women from voting. That's the kind of thing that actually is remarkably the kind of material that we get here at this point. Is that this is the kind of narrative that stops women from voting. So all kinds of interesting stuff to look at with hysteria, which is cool, and something that we can look at as we move on. So let's head back to the text, because we're about to see the entrance of, once the king has finished his kind of analysis of the situation, he says, when sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. First her father slain, next your son gone, and he, most violent author of his own just removed, the people muddied. It's like everything's going wrong. Ophelia is mad. The king's dead. Polonius is dead. Good Polonius is dead. We have done but greenly in hugger mugger to inter him. Basically, we've done it in secret. We've done it quietly, and this perhaps is why Ophelia is divided from herself. This phrase here is fantastic to use, divided from herself, as a representation of madness. Hamlet is often described as being not himself. In fact, later on in the play, he decides that I was not myself. I was mad Hamlet, not sane Hamlet, and he uses this as a distinction between the two things. So please keep this kind of language, this language of being divided from oneself, as a representation of madness is fantastic, and it works as well in Malfi. And her fair judgment, without the which we are pictures or mere beauty. So he says here, look, when we have our judgment removed, when we have become mad, we are pictures or beasts. Now Hamlet uses the language of beasts earlier to describe his madness, but pictures starts here, and that's probably what we're actually using to talk about Ophelia. Last, and as much containing as all these, her brother is secret come from France, feeds on this wonder, keeps himself in clouds, and wants not buzzers to infect his ear with pestilent speeches of his father's death, wherein necessity of basically, I'm going to summarise this speech. Laertes is back. He's back from France, and he is fixated on this whole, his father's death, and he is really kind of coming back. And he wants to kind of sort something out about this, and the king is worried. Messengers come in, and he's like, he runs into the room, and we have this kind of noise from within. A noise within means essentially that backstage there will be some kind of ruckus going on. There'll be some kind of like clashing of metal or something along the lines. And the king asks for his Switzers. These are his guards. So Switzers would be your royal guards, I believe. Anyway, in terms of context, yep, Swiss guards. There you go. And the messenger asks him, save yourself, my lord. The ocean, overpeering of his list, eats not the flats with more impetuous haste than young Laertes in a riotous head. This idea here, this is a very specific thing. This is the ocean jumping over the shores or boundaries of the sea. So basically, a naval flooding. So the king is like, the messenger's like, oh God, get out of here. Laertes has come and is overbearing your officers. The rabble call him Lord, and as the world were but not now to begin, antiquity forgot, custom not known, the ratifiers and props of every word. They cry, choose we, Laertes shall be king. Caps, hands and tongue applauded to the cowards. Laertes shall be king, Laertes king. So Laertes hasn't just arrived home. He's arrived at the head of a rabble of people, the commoners, who are crying for him to be made king, as the messenger says, as if they've forgotten all custom and antiquity. A nice reminder there of the kind of traditional nature of the monarchy, that it's not necessarily a natural thing. But they kind of make this thing, and the queen's like, how cheerfully in the false trail they cry, oh, this on this counter you felt false Danish dogs. So the queen kind of has a kind of really strongly negative reaction to this claim that Laertes is claiming for kingship. The doors are broken down. Laertes storms into the building, and he is like, where is this king? Sir, stand you without. So he's like, I want the king. This is crazy. This is really a change for Laertes, and I will show you a couple of examples of images here, and here's some Ophelia as well. So this is I really wanted to show you was the kind of the impact, and I think this whole scene 4-5 especially and 4-7 as well are scenes that really just show the impact of violence and revenge and kind of show the problems. In both versions, Laertes is given this kind of like aggressive, kind of trench coaty, leather coaty look. I think this version in the BBC one with David Tennant, I think this don't get on with this actor at all at this point in the play. He just seems particularly he doesn't seem particularly threatening. The Laertes here though does command a little bit more, but they both come back in this aggressive style. Laertes here wielding a gun. Now in both cases as well, the Ophelia actor, in this case this is a little bit later in the scene where Ophelia has re-entered with the flowers, very dishevelled, very not herself. This is post her attempts at stripping in the scene as well, which she does. If you've watched the production, you'll remember that. They've kind of put her into some kind of raggedy clothes at this point. In this version, we see the Ophelia much the same, very deject, her clothing dishevelled, her hair not in its normal place, and they go to the extent, and obviously this is quite a contemporary production, they go to the extent of including some kind of self-harm marks down her forearms. Again, both these productions available to watch on Digital Theatre Plus, but you can see, and this is the point, this is the consequence of Polonius' murder. This is what Hamlet has done, and I think this whole scene, now that Hamlet's been removed from the play, you see what he has done to characters on stage, and it's a real kind of dramatic impact, a showing of consequence of his violence. Now obviously Hamlet didn't intend to kill Polonius, he didn't show much fear about it, but he didn't intend to do it, but this is the consequence it's had. So here we have then Laertes, and the followers all come in. The followers want to come in with him. Laertes says like, no, I want myself alone with the king here, and they give him leave, and that's fine. So he starts with this: "Oh, thou vile king, give me my father." So Laertes is like really aggressive, really direct and to the point. Hamlet never does this. Laertes, no reason to be so kind of powerful, but he is like, look, the vile king, give me my father. Where is my father? The queen asks him to calm down, and Laertes is like, no, the drop of blood that's calm proclaims me bastard, cries cuckold to my father, brands the harlot even here between the chaste unsmirched brow of my true mother. Now this is quite an intense, where's my, oh no, there it is. So this is the first reference to blood in this scene. Now obviously we've seen blood in relation to revengers. Earlier on Hamlet says, now I could drink hot blood, when he considers being the violent revenger, and we have the description of Pyrrhus in the extract from the Aeneid. But here Laertes uses this idea that if there is a drop of blood within his veins that is calm, that drop of blood suggests that he is a bastard, i.e. not his father's child. cries cuckold to my father. Now, we've talked about cuckolds before. What monsters you maketh them. So this suggests that a different man had fathered him, and brands the harlot even here between the chaste and smudged brow of my true mother. So he suggests, like, look, this would make my mother a harlot, i.e. what he's saying is, if I was a little bit calm, I wouldn't really be the true son of my father. I should be, as a dutiful son, really furious about his death. A lovely contrast to perhaps Hamlet here. And the king is like, what is the cause? Why are you so angry? What is the meaning behind this? Let him go, Gertrude. Let him do what he wants. I will, there's such divinity that doth hedge a king. It's like, I'll be protected, kind of almost divinely. He's like, I'll be fine, basically. Tell me, Laertes, why are you like this? And he's like, where's my dad? When you get the idea. I'm not going to narrate the section for you. It's pretty straightforward. They talk. Laertes finds out why his dad is dead. He asks how came he dead, and he doesn't want to be juggled with. He's like, to hell allegiances, I will do what I want. Vows to the blackest devil, conscience and grace to the profoundest pit. I dare damnation. He's like, I will do what I need. I don't care how came he dead. I will kill anyone, do anything, do whatever I need. He is violent and aggressive and revengeful in a way that Hamlet never really is. So it's a huge contrast here. To this point I stand that both the worlds I give to negligence. Let come what comes, I'll be revenged most thoroughly for my father. So a nice obvious link to the theme of revenge here. And the king's like, who shall say my will? Not all the worlds, and for my means my husband them so well they shall go far with little. So it's like, I have basically got huge willpower. I'm going to sort some stuff out. This is all going to get done. The king says, I will tell you. He's like, but in your revenge, will you just basically sort out that revenge when you find out? And he's like, yep, cool. I will sort out just the enemies of my father. And then the king tells him, he said, do you really want to know? And he's like, kind of going for this kind of build-up of tension as to whether Laertes were friends. Laertes gives his last line to his good friends. Thus wide, I'll open my arms, and like the kind life-rendering pelican, repass them with my blood. Again, this blood theme coming back. People believe that the pelican fed its child by stabbing itself with its beak and feeding them with blood. Obviously, understanding of animals has come a long way since this time period. And the king's like, well, no, you do speak like a good child and a true gentleman, and I am guiltless of your father's death. It's not me. It's actually, guess what? It's someone else. It's and he's just about to say when we have Ophelia come back on stage. As I showed you, just as a reminder here, here she is there with her flowers dishevelled. She comes back in. Ophelia brings up this emotion in Laertes that he can't quite understand. He's had his father's death now. He says, heat dry up my brains. Everything go, oh, this is horrible. Kind sister, sweet Ophelia, heavens. Is it possible a young maid's wits should be as mortal as a poor man's life? So he kind of still views her as the maid. And he worries that basically that her mind has snapped with the death of their father. She sings some more songs about her dead father, their dead father, I suppose, at this point. And Laertes continues to react to her, and he says, "Look, you couldn't even persuade me if you were sane to take more revenge more than you are by being insane." Basically, Ophelia's madness is driving him on to take revenge even further. This is the kind of key point here, is that he believes this is a further stimulus to his revenge. Now, Ophelia hands out a bunch of flowers. She does that and sings some more songs about her father. That takes us to the end of the scene, realistically. I'm going to talk about the flowers in a second. She hands them out to various people. You get the idea as she goes through. So there's nothing too much else to add on that front. Realistically, we then end up at the end of the scene here. Ooh, there we go. Let's jump back a couple. I'm going to quickly talk you through the flowers while this is kind of flipping between several things here. I'll get that sorted out. So, the flowers, floriography is the word used to describe the study or the kind of the language of flowers. If you open the document, you can see here, and you can check through them yourselves. There is a very specific meaning behind each of the flowers chosen by the king, well, not by the king, by Ophelia here, and each of them is given to a specific character that bring us a particular idea about that character. So the ones I'd really point out, she gives remembrance and thoughts to Laertes. She gives to the king deceived lovers and adultery and faithlessness, which is an interesting one. She gives the king, almost suggests she knows more than she might do. Rue is a symbol for bitterness and the cause of most abortions at the time period, which she keeps some for herself, again perhaps furthering that line. The daisy, she picks it up and sets it down. It's an innocence symbol, and she doesn't give it to anybody, which suggests perhaps a general pervasive guilt throughout the court. And Violet says that she would have brought them along, but that they all died when her father did. And violets, as it says, are the symbol for faithlessness and fidelity, which is particularly interesting here. So all kinds of stuff, and I'll close this scene by using Laertes' line. He gets some more in a second. We've lost it again. There we go. And that is this line here: a document in madness. That Ophelia is a kind of almost a kind of symbol, an object of madness. So the objectification of Ophelia's madness here, particularly important for the scene. Okay, so we'll skip ahead to Act 4, Scene 6 now, which is pretty straightforward as a scene. We'll go through that. Before we do, very quickly, I will remind you in here that I've included the whole of a shorter essay on women, madness and feminist criticism. So if you want some really good stuff on AO5 there, I would suggest using that. And we'll get to Laertes' revenge in a second. Okay, we're going to very quickly skip through Act 4, Scene 6, because there really isn't much of it. Basically, Horatio holds a meeting with the gentleman who has met some seafaring men who have letters for him. Those letters come from Hamlet. He's like, okay, fine. The sailor, one is to go to Horatio, one is to go on to the king, or I can't remember exactly, did they pass them on to the king? There you go. Basically, they've got some letters from Hamlet. And he is to let Horatio know this. Horatio reads the letter, and basically he says, once you have overlooked this letter, then pass these on to the king. He gives us a short narrative about a pirate giving chase to the boat. Hamlet has gotten on board the pirate's ship. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern go onwards. They hold their course for England. We'll find out more about them in Act 5, Scene 1. He's like, I've got much to tell thee. But Hamlet's on his way home with these pirates. And then Horatio says that he gives the letters back and that they can go on to the king, where the king will be told all about them as well. This is a really weird, small scene. And I've put a article on the document here about Hamlet. I can check that. I've sent that over to you as well. Hamlet and the Pirates: A Critical Reconsideration. It's a weird part of the plot. It's very much a Deus Ex Machina, which I can maybe I should type up on the screen. So Deus Ex Machina is an example of a kind of artificial intervention. We talked about it before, I believe, in the form of the found horoscope in The Duchess of Malfi, where we discover, I say we, Basola discovers the horoscope of the newborn child, and that tells him all he needs to know. In this case, magical pirates, basically, plot pirates turned up and took Hamlet home, which is good for him. So moving on to 4-7, this is where we kind of get into Laertes' revenge proper. So we assume that the king has been in conversation with him prior to the start of the scene. Now must your conscience my acquittance seal, and you must put me in your heart for friends. So the king is kind of drawing Laertes into his confidence into his kind of friendship. Since you have heard and a knowing ear that which you have your noble father slain, pursue us. Like, now you know who's killed your dad. And Laertes is, yep, it does appear to be that case. You can tell me why you proceed not against these feats, so criminal and capital in nature, as by your safety, greatness, wisdom, all things else, you mainly were stirred up. So it's like, why have you not taken the normal legal proceedings against Hamlet in this circumstance? He's like, oh, there's two reasons. One, you are not really old enough and politically wise enough to know why I haven't done this. So there's a suggestion that the king is perhaps get rid of these. Sorry, that the king is a much better schemer than and distrusts his motives. And he's like, look, you don't quite know the kind of things. Like, look, the queen, his mother, lives for Hamlet. She loves her son, and for myself, I love her, and therefore I couldn't do that to her. And also, the general public, as was mentioned earlier, I think he mentions this in 4.3, the general public really love him, so I couldn't kill him in their eyes either. She's like, look, I would get rid of him, but my wife and the public don't want me to, so I'm not gonna do it legitimately, so through legal means. So he's going to find some other means. Now she's like, look, I've got a noble father lost, my dad's dead, my sister's been driven into madness, and she may not recover, I may not recover from this is a pretty dire situation. Why shouldn't I get revenge? So the king is like, well, I will take you through this revenge. Is that the next page? No. He's like, look, I am, I want my revenge. And King's like, yeah, don't worry about it, you'll get your revenge. But we do have motive and reason to do it. But we will just, I loved your father, but we will just, reflect on this, and we will take our time in this. Now, this is at this point that the messenger arrives with news from the boats that Hamlet has returned. Or Hamlet is returning, I suppose. So this is unwelcome news for the king. Yeah, these, your majesty, this to the queen, from Hamlet, who brought them, and we have sailors that were passed on to him. So here we bring in the notes from the sailors. They were given to him by Claudio, who we don't know. We never know who that is. He received them, or of him that brought them. So Laertes shall read the letters, and we have the Hamlet's line: High and mighty, you shall know, I am set naked on your kingdom. Tomorrow shall I beg leave to see your kingly eyes, when I shall, first asking your pardon, thereunto recount the occasion of my sudden return. So Hamlet's like, look, I'm back, I'm out in the country, I will be with you shortly, which is a kind of almost an open threat to the king. And he's like, what does this mean? And the rest coming back, or is it some kind of abuse and those such things? So the king's like, oh no, what is this? And Laertes is like, do you know the hand? And we know that it's Hamlet. It's fine. Like, it is Hamlet's character, and he says alone, so we know it's Hamlet. So Laertes is like, ugh, fine. This is a crazy scenario, but let Hamlet come. It warms the very sickness in my heart that I live, and tell him to his teeth, thus didst thou. So he's like, look, I want to confront Hamlet and tell him what he did. And the king starts to manipulate. The scheming comes back here. And the king starts to manipulate him. He's like, look, if it be so, Laertes, as how should it be so, how otherwise, will you be ruled by me? So the king is like, look, let me take control of this scenario. Laertes is fine with that, seemingly. Look, don't, as long as you don't overrule me to being peaceful, I want you to let me take my revenge. And he's like, look, yeah, no, I will work on him. I will find an exploit. I will make my devices, essentially, under which he shall not choose but fall. And for his death, no wind of blame shall breathe, but even his mother shall in charge the practice and call it an accident. So he's like, don't worry, I'm going to sort out a specific kind of death whereby he will, appear to die by accident, and none of us need to worry about it. And he realistically, I will be ruled the rather if you could devise it so that I might rule you. And he's like, look, I will be doing. He's like, yep, I'm happy with this plan, but I want to be the instrument that actually does this problem. He's like, if we are going to do this secret plan, I still want to kill him. And, the king's like essentially okay with it, but we'll sort this out. And they start going on towards they start making the plan together. This is all particularly not useful stuff. We talking about some of their kind of skills and abilities and things. Realistically, not hugely useful for us at this point. They kind of make some kind of particular talking through, and they eventually get to the actual contest here, which they start talking about that Laertes' usage of the rapier, and they get to eventually coming to the plan that they are going to do, the plan that they eventually come up with, which is the duel. Yeah. And we get all the kind of content through here. Again, this is all just essentially the king and Laertes scheming together. If you want any specific questions on this content, that's fine, but I don't think there's really anything useful that I can really add to say. The king is kind of pushing Laertes on. He's essentially kind of questioning, occasionally challenging, now that I think you did not love your father, then that I know it is begun by time, and that I see in passages to prove time qualifies the spark and fire that lives with the very flame of love. A kind of bit, so he's kind of pushing on, he's egging on, he's pushing Laertes' things. This idea of loving one's father as a justification for revenge is really common. And eventually he said, what would you undertake to show yourself indeed your father's son, more than in words? What would you do? How are you going to show this? He's really building him up to just killing Hamlet. And at this point, Laertes is like, I would cut his throat in the church. We're back on that full blood, violence, revenge, just slit his throat in the holy place. And the king's like, yeah, maybe no. He says, no place indeed should murder sanctuarize. Revenge should have no bounds. But, good Laertes, will you do this? Keep close with your chamber. Hamlet returns, shall know you have come home. Will put on those, shall praise your excellence, and set a double varnish on the fame the Frenchman gave you. Bring you in fine together and wager on your heads. He's like, no, you're not going to cut his throat in the church with your sword. We're going to use it sensibly. We're going to build it up. A nice little competition between you and Hamlet. We'll put some bets on it. And we'll sort it all out in a much more polite way. The king cannot allow for the level of violence that Laertes wants to see. It doesn't fit with him as a character. He's much more about sneaking around and doing it in kind of schemes and plots. And we get to the real scheme, which is to poison the blade. It says, a sword unbaited in a passive practice requisite from my father, I will do it, and for that purpose I'll anoint my sword. I brought an unction of a mountebank, so mortal that, but dip a knife in it where it draws blood, no cataclysm, serrate, collective from all simples that it hath virtue, under the moon can save the thing from death, that is but scratched withal. So basically I've got a poison that the tiniest bit of it that touches a man in his blood anyway will kill him, so I will put that on my sword and we'll do that. The king seems to be okay with this. Let's further think on this. Weigh what convenience both of time and means may fit to us to our shape. If this should fail, and that our drift look through our bad performance, 'twere better not essayed. Therefore, this project should have a back or second that might help if this did blast improve. Basically, we should have a backup plan. If the first one goes wrong, we need a second option. He's like, I like the poisoning. I'm a big fan of poisoning. He's like, he doesn't admit to obviously having done it previously, but the king seems suspiciously okay with poisoning. And we will, basically sort out a position. We will sort out a motion when, we'll make sure this is a kind of a proper kind of workout, and that when he is thirsty, I will give him a drink, and I will have in this chalice put within some, well, you can take a wild swing what he's put within that chalice. It's the king. He has probably put in some poison. Your venomed stock our purpose may hold there. So he's going to put some poison in there. And you're thinking, okay, plan sorted. Laertes is on board. Everything's going well. Question I suppose to ask a little bit is, what is happening to Laertes here? Is he necessarily, is he actually, just being manipulated by, this is a question to ask. I've got two questions here that I've set for you realistically, that you can think about for yourselves. Is Laertes an evil revenger, well, not an evil revenger, but the kind of cautious revenger, the cautionary revenger that we want to avoid. But also, is Laertes the victim that we believe Hamlet to be, as much as he is, in a similar position? Is he being manipulated by Claudius? Is it really his fault? Yeah, but something to kind of consider here. Now the Queen interrupts, and we get this. Just once kind of Laertes is kind of set to the plan, the Queen bursts in and is like, "Yep, your sister's drowned, Laertes." And he asks where, and we have this. This is what I just kind of showed you some images of. This really, really aestheticized moment where we have the Queen kind of giving this description of Ophelia's death. There's a willow grass. And I love this piece of prose. It's really nice, but it's kind of tricky in terms of thinking about the themes and ideas that it suggests. There's a willow grows askant the brook that shows his hoary leaves in the glassy stream. There with fantastic garlands did she make of crowflowers, nettles, daisies, and long purples that liberal shepherds give a grosser name. But our cold maids do dead men's fingers call them. There on the pendant boughs her crown of weeds, clambering to hang an envious sliver of the tree, broke when down her weedy trophies and herself fell in the weeping brook. Her clothes spread wide, and mermaid-like awhile they bore her up. Which time she chanted snatches of old lords, so lords are kind of hymns, religious songs, as one incapable of her own distress, or like a creature native and endued unto that element. So she was there in the water, like a kind of almost a native to the element, but long it could not be till that her garments heavy with their drink pulled the poor wretch from her melodious lay to muddy death. Alas then she is drowned. And Laertes says, too much of water that hast thou, poor Ophelia, and therefore I forbid my tears. So he makes that link between tears and water. But yet it is our trick. Nature her custom holds. Let shame say what it will. When those are gone, the woman will be out. Adieu, my lord. I have a speech of fire that fain would blaze, but that this fully drown it. And so Laertes reacts to this, and he charges out of the room. He's like, "Oh, well, I'm furious again." The king had calmed him down, got him all ready for this plan. They'd sorted out the whole of the plan, the poisoned sword, the poisoned chalice. And then Laertes is like, "What? Ophelia's dead. Now I'm raging again." He heads out. The king is like, "Let's follow Gertrude. How much I had to do to calm his rage. Now fear I, this will give it start again. Therefore, let's follow." So the king is like really panicking that Laertes is back on his raging war path of, slitting throats in church. Now, the reason why I particularly want to draw attention to Ophelia's death is some context stuff. Firstly, it's really beautiful prose. It's not prose, it's poetry. It's written in verse. There's some lovely descriptions of flowers and colours and natural imagery. There's a description of her as this mermaid-like figure in the water. However, she is also dying. And there is also the ambiguity around her death as to whether it is suicide or not. The reason why I put Eophilius is that especially Gertrude's description of what happened here really sounds like an accident. It makes it sound very much like an accident. As soon as we get into the next scene, which we'll do next week, Act 5, Scene 1, the grave diggers suggest that there might be a suicide. Now we can think about why Gertrude does this, is that she can guarantee a Christian burial for Ophelia. If Ophelia had killed herself, then she would not have been permitted a burial in Christian grounds. Suicide was a cardinal sin, mortal sin, and it would be one that would send you to hell, and would partly because you would be denied burial in sanctified grounds. Often suicides would be buried at places like crossroads, along the sides of roads, or in other busy and well put upon areas, because that was supposed to not give the spirit rest. So she presents it in this very much kind of like almost beautiful description of the death, to give it a real sense of passivity, that it's not really her fault. So that's something that's really interesting here. Now this is picked up then later on by lots of artists, especially in the 19th century, where they start representing Ophelia in this very, very kind of like innocent and kind of beautiful manner, whereby she now has to realistically kind of, just be this kind of figure of male objective beauty. Now, we talked about Ophelia becoming a document already, haven't we? This idea that Ophelia has already become some kind of example of madness, some kind of example of feminine madness. But here she almost becomes an example of feminine beauty, especially in these 19th century, mostly pre-Raphaelite or pre-Raphaelite influenced here. I've given you the names of the artists as well, but two of the one at the top, Millet, and the bottom right there, Waterhouse, both would be artists in the pre-Raphaelite style. They focus on the kind of beauty and the natural imagery in her death scene, even though it's potentially a suicide, even though it's the death of a young woman. They find this kind of beauty in the scene, which kind of suggests, again, attitudes towards women contextually and the way in which she is presented. If we go back to the British Library article from the start, and in fact, even if we look at this scene, look at Ophelia here. This is how Ophelia is presented on stage in these versions, and yet somehow between this scene and a scene set, a couple of hours later at most, probably, she ends up like this in productions. So there's a kind of, male view, I suppose, of Ophelia that we have here, which is a particularly interesting one, and one that really sets up this idea here for us. And it kind of gives us interesting things. This is quite a distressing scene for us. Lots of early, especially like 18th century and early 19th century versions, make Ophelia just kind of very much, they strip out a lot of her lines. They often cast a singer to play her rather than a full actor, and they kind of deny her the kind of things because it's too troubling. But in the 19th century, we start to have like a real kind of fascination with her as a figure, especially to the romantics, especially to those figures who want to see the kind of turbulent emotions in her character that she has. And that kind of brings us to the end, realistically, of the scene. Ophelia is now dead. So to kind of recap the scenes, Ophelia has gone mad. Laertes is back for revenge. He's talked out of it from the king, quite rightly, because I suppose he doesn't really want revenge on the king. Hamlet's coming back. He's written some letters. He's coming home with some pirates. The king is preparing Laertes to kill Hamlet. He's got a plan sorted out whereby they're going to hold a fencing match and bet on that. And also they've got the with poison blades, and then they've also got the backup poisoned cup. So we know the plan, and realistically, guys, given this is a tragedy nearing the end, we probably know as well that this is actually how Hamlet is going to die. This probably shouldn't be, at this point, a surprise when Hamlet dies this way, because this is really being kind of quite heavy-handedly set up for us here. The king has calmed Laertes down. He's got him kind of under his control, that Machiavellian manipulator here, kind of back in control. And then just at the end, Ophelia is now dead, and Laertes is perhaps back on the warpath again. So that's really that for today. Obviously, you got all your stuff to do here. Hopefully that lesson helped over here. Hopefully all that content really helped you in terms of making sure that you got everything you need to complete all this week's tasks. We are 2 scenes away from the end of the play. I'll be setting some more stuff to do with the Duchess of Malfi in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for all that kind of stuff, because I think we need to really ramp up our revision process on that as well. If you have any questions now, could you ask them to me before we go? If you have any kind of immediate questions on the content we've covered today, I'll wait around for a couple of seconds talking for a little bit more. If you don't have any, I can cut this video off later on. I can edit this all out if we really need to. So yeah, we've got a couple of scenes left, and then once that's done, we'll do a couple of thematic overviews in terms of things. I want to spend some time looking at how to use AO5, AO3 especially. We're also doing some close language analysis, because I think that's something really important for us to be doing. If there's anything else, obviously please let me know. Use the comment box or whatever on the Teams if you need to. Otherwise, I hope you obviously have a good rest of the day. I hope you have a good week. Please submit your content via the appropriate channels. Who do I think is more feminine? Ooh, Claudius or Hamlet? Ooh. Good question. Good question, Faye. I think... I think in terms of cultural interpretations of characters, in terms of how the character's been received later on in time, I think Hamlet has become the more typically kind of quote unquote feminine character than Claudius. Simply in terms of productions, there's been plenty of productions now where they've kind of played with the gender roles. If you go onto Digital Theatre Plus, you can find the version, I believe, on there where we do have a gender flipped casting of Hamlet, which is cool. That being said, in terms of the time period, the conspicuously kind of present nature of Claudius is kind of his particularly kind of cowardly quote unquote means of killing and poisoning would firmly put him in a kind of almost a kind of, not necessarily femme, but certainly a kind of non-masculine figure. So I think probably culturally and contextually overall it's Hamlet. But I think it is important to bear in mind the things that Claudius does which go against traditional masculinity. Okay, hope that answers your question. All right, anything else, let me know. As I said, I'll try and catch you up to you on a one-to-one basis in the chat over the course of the week, and make sure stuff's all done. Okay, cool. Have a lovely time, guys. Hope the weather picks up a wee bit, and I'll see you next week. See ya.